Hello, hello, I'm Blackjack, and today we're going to be continuing to discuss Rooster Teeth's RWBY, with today's focus being the Ice Queen, Weiss Schnee. As opposed to RWBY, the character, most of the other characters don't have quite as many beta designs, but they do have some primary sketches, and we'll see later that the ideas in Weiss's design and her character were decided pretty early on, and things developed as the story came more together. As opposed to RWBY, who had a design first and a story later, the white trailer paints a pretty easy to grasp outline for Weiss. The song she's singing, Mirror Mirror, tells you that she's lonely and hiding her true self, letting us know that she doesn't exactly care for what we later learn is her heiress role under her controlling father. With just the trailer for reference, it's clear that she has some form of celebrity, singing for a massive crowd on a stage, even if we didn't quite know what level she was at just yet. Going on to her design, another clue to her prestigious background is her outfits. Everything about it reads as princessy and proper, though I'll go into details a little later after her beta designs. Even before she was finalized, more than anyone, she always had a lot of things that give you very clear details and were built around her role as a more princess-type character. First off, the fairy tale origin is quite obviously Snow White. Weiss and Schnee mean white and snow, and Mirror Mirror alludes to the magic mirror and the fairest one of all, and she even gets all 7 dwarves as a butler. Once again, I'll go ahead and mention that one of Weiss's earliest designs was retrofitted for Melanie, along with Ruby from Ilsha. I already talked about that in my last video, but Melanie seems to bear less resemblance to her counterpart. Taking a quick look at her, she has a strapless white dress and a lot of fancy jewelry, but otherwise she's pretty unrecognizable as Weiss. The outfit looks like something Weiss might have worn, but I think it's a bit too busy for her purposes, compared to her far more simple design. Looking at the first concept by Monty, we see that Weiss hasn't changed all that much. I imagine that he looked at her and thought this was just a bit too simple, but it was in the direction he was going. Her final look is pretty unchanged, just with a lot more added detail to it and some further refinement on the hair. It lacks the reds on her jacket and the black on her dress, leaving it rather monochromatic, and her ponytail looks to still be centered and a bit looser. That would have probably been a bit too much white for the already white-haired and white-skinned Weiss. You can also see some beta designs for her emblem, the Schnee Dust Company logo. That means it was decided this early on that characters would have logos, but I do wonder if the Schnee family legacy was written into her story just yet, or if it's just a personal logo. RWBY had the cross originally before moving on to the rose, so this must have been a little bit later into development, but still rather early on. Another thing of note is her necklace. While it's incredibly hard to tell what it is, it looks a bit different than Weiss's final necklace. I'm not 100% sure if I'm putting the right words in the wrong place, but Monty stated on Twitter that Weiss's necklace was an apple, referencing the poison apple given to Snow White by the jealous queen in the original fairy tale. Now, I honestly can't tell if the beta design included is the apple, and to be honest, it's hard to see that it's an apple in the main show. It wasn't until I looked at some screenshots of Volume 3, where they improved the models, adding in some detail and making the outline smoother, that I found this shot. So yes, there were technical improvements made between Volumes 1 and 3, just more minor than 3 to 4. Even with the improved models, it's still very hard to see that the necklace and understand that it's an apple. It also isn't helped in the fact that most of her concept art, the necklace is a teardrop gemstone. Still, the fact that it's there is an often overlooked detail, and it's a nice reference to the original fairy tale. And speaking of said concept art, the first drawing by Ian Lee shows that most of her design was figured out by the initial sketch. There's still a few changes made, but this is pretty much the final result. Her dress has a harsher transition to blue as opposed to the subtle shade change and lacks the patterns at the bottom. Her belt is a bit stylized, appearing as if falling snow. That might just be an artistic license, though. And her sleeves are a bit longer and have dangling gems on them. I imagine these were removed for animation purposes, though I feel they'd also be kind of bad for fighting. Her hair is also styled in a different way in the front, and notably, while the hair was changed to fit more in line with Monty's sketch, you can also see that her ponytail was longer and split into 2 distinct sections. What makes this and another thing interesting is that the concept sketch exists and is an early version of Weiss's final portrait used in the trailers. It keeps the longer hair and the gems, but you may also notice the silhouette of Mirrornaster, her weapon, looks more gun-like than the final version, and is just a silhouette, wasn't finalized. And Weiss's face also lacks her distinctive scar. Instead, she has a beauty mark under the same eye, even this late in development. There's even concept art of Weiss maintaining the beauty mark instead of the scar. The decision must have been made rather late in development, right before the White trailer was released, because the scar was a big part of it, and has a lot of meaning in the series itself. Another late decision, made so late so as to make a few brief shots in the White trailer, is that Mirrodin Aster's revolver mechanism only contains red dust, as opposed to the rainbow in the final series. It's incredibly hard to see in motion, but there's at least one shot where all cylinders are red, and even the previous portrait by Ayn Lee has that as well. You'll notice that each of the compartments has just red dust, whereas in the final version it's red, yellow, cyan, multiple different colors to represent the different types. Monty has stated that he originally wanted the design to have all red and be more homogenized, but decided it'd be best to have more colors so that people could tell which dust did what, eventually becoming the more elemental crystals we see later in the series, that all have divine powers for defined colors. And now that we've seen what led up to her final design, I can actually analyze it. As mentioned, it's the most indicative of Weiss, showing that she's essentially royalty. The most obvious is the fact that her choice of headwear is a piece of jewelry that literally looks like a tiara, holding her ponytail in place. It's only fitting that the heiress of the SDC wears what looks to be a crown, though again I wonder how early this was decided. The concept art, even early on, shows potential logos, and she's always had the princess vibe to her, but the tiara was added with Ayn Lee's sketch. The dress is clean color, fancy patterns, snowflake motif, and almost corset-like thin-waist combat skirt combo also do their part in showing something with class. And even her weapon, a rapier, is usually associated with the upper class and royalty, being described as a very noble weapon. Weiss's heels and jacket are also very upper echelon, and her back proudly, quote-unquote, displays the Schnee logo. All of that brings me to my word that I've chosen for Weiss. As I mentioned last time, I chose a term to describe what I feel each girl's outfits and designs mean in the context of the story. There's another very unique note about Weiss's design that I feel says a lot about the character. It's not exactly a physical change, and it's more tell and show, but it does get play when paired with the second White trailer, which shows Weiss early on. Despite Weiss's clean, concise, symmetrical design, something is off. Well, two things actually. Asymmetry is a recurring element in a lot of RWBY designs. RWBY's belt is tilted to one side, Blake has mismatched sleeves, and Yang has multiple asymmetric elements, and many other characters have similar elements for no other reason than shut up fashion, or shut up RWBY fashion, I guess. Though it is somewhat fitting for the royalty-esque Weiss to have only a few asymmetrical elements, they do say quite a bit. And they represent something about her character. And the term I've chosen for Weiss that her design sort of amplifies, I feel, is rebellion. To be honest, that requires a bit more of a confirmation. I think soft rebellion might be a bit more in the realm of what I'm describing, but I would still use the word to describe Weiss's designs. And it's something present on both of her designs, and I feel describes her, at least character, rather well. The asymmetric elements on Weiss's design are her ponytail, off to one side, and her scar. Now, neither of these say much on their own without context, but together they say quite a bit about Weiss's hidden side. Early on, Weiss is a bratty girl that talks too much about her family name. She goes on and on about the SDC and her family name, and much of her story has to do with her family issues and what it means to carry the Schnee name. Even her semblance, Glyphs, is the one hereditary semblance in the series, reflecting the fact that she's literally bound to her history. She's the only person in the series that has the same semblance as her sister, as her mother, presumably on and on. She literally carries the weight of her entire family with her wherever she goes, and that's reflected in her personality, reflected in her semblance. All that said, Weiss hates her name. She doesn't like being a Schnee, or at least being a Schnee if it means having the same name as her father. She wants to reclaim the name and make it mean something aside from horrific business practices and discrimination. And Weiss rebels how she can. Part of her story is that she decides her life is her own, and that she'll make her own choices. The trailer, given context, is Weiss's test. It's expanded upon in the manga adaptation, but Weiss fighting the Knight, which is actually a ghost-like grim like the one RWBY fights in the Volume 4 premiere, is her final exam. She has to prove that she's capable of defeating it on her own in order to escape and go to Beacon, otherwise she'd be forced to go to Atlas Academy and stay under the shadow of her father. All of that gives Weiss's scar context. She literally earned it by fighting her way through an intentionally rigged battle meant to punish her for trying to be her own person. She wasn't expected to be able to take up the challenge, but she did, and she received the scar in the process, marking her. The other element, Weiss's asymmetric ponytail, was also stated to be a symbol of the rebellion. Again, this was stated rather than shown, at least up into her second trailer. In it, a flashback shows Weiss wearing her ponytail directly behind her head. This was when she was under her father's thumb and hadn't gained the strength to fight her way out, you see when she loses to all the Beowulfs at the end. When Weiss is at Beacon, she wears her hair to the side, as a way to mess up the perfect and symmetrical doll image her father wants her to be. She's not a proper little princess that's going to sit down, shut up, and be told what to do until Daddy decides she's obedient enough to take control of the company. This brings us to Volume 4. But before that, I'll give a quick thought on Weiss's alternate outfit, codenamed Snowpea. Compared to the other names of the other outfits, Hunter, Intruder, and Slayer, Snowpea. Whatever. It's really cute and I like it, but it doesn't have much to say. It's almost completely white and it looks very fashionable. Because it is. You can just go out and buy it. Like, it's just straight up available. Admittedly, I'm not 100% sure if the Snowpea was based on this, but it sure looks like it. It would also fit, seeing as Monty was clearly influenced by modern fashion, and the rich girl would definitely be shopping for expensive and stylish clothes. I do wish it had a bit more to say, but I really do like how it looks. And now, properly moving on, after the fall of Beacon, Weiss is shipped back home and once again placed under her father's control. Her outfit is the one with the least amount of change between the four girls, but it still represents a few things, especially later on. And to be honest, it kind of makes sense that it would be similar. Weiss's first dress is evocative of her princess-type nature and inability to separate herself from a rich family, while the time-skip outfit can evoke the fact that she's being forced to stay as the princess type that is tied to her family. The dress and coat were likely chosen by your father, canon-wise. I'd honestly be interested to see what Weiss's outfit would have looked like if the story had gone a different direction. Imagine if, instead of going back to Atlas, Weiss had taken a path that allowed her to stay independent and rebel freely. Say she didn't go to Atlas, or anything like that. While I doubt she'd lose the dress look, I feel like we might have seen a more dramatic change that would show us that she's not just an heiress. Something with a bit more flair, color, anything that would make it look a bit more different. What we ended up with represents her return to her family against her will. While the main outfit doesn't really state that outside of context, the fact that there's a secondary version of the outfit kind of does. When forced to do her father's bidding by singing and attending the charity event, Weiss trades in her combat skirt for a full-length dress, and trades in her platform wedges for straight heels. Now, neither type of shoe are really good for a fight, but the platform heel would make a marginally better than a straight-up single-point heel. Both of those relatively minor changes make to the outfit aim to remove the agency in them, taking away the parts of Weiss's costume that show she's a huntress. Instead, she's the Schnee heiress in a dress. And that's all I have to say about Weiss's Volume 4 outfit, but we actually aren't quite done yet. For reasons I will never not be sure about, Weiss's Volume 6 outfit is a little bit different. She's the only one to get it changed that late in the game, but she's added two things to her outfit. The first being tights. I don't think that there's any grand reason for this, but Volume 6 takes place in a cold, snowy area, so it does make logical sense. If you ignore the fact that Ruby still has thigh highs, and Yang's robot arm might cause some serious frostbite, but whatever, anime. I'll mention that they're a blue gradient. I doubt this has anything to do with anything, but each of the girls got another outfit in the Ruby manga by Shiro Miwa. I didn't really bring this up with Ruby because they're not really canon, nor do they really have a whole lot to say. Ruby's outfit is pretty much the same, except with some gloves. Blake's only noticeable thing is that her ribbons are properly tied, and Yang wears camo. Weiss, however, adds some color to her outfit with blue tights. Again, the Volume 6 design was probably independent of this, but might as well bring it up at least once in this little series of videos. The other and more noticeable change with Weiss in Volume 6 is that she wears a red scarf. Again, fitting in for the cold climate, but I think it actually has a lot more to say and fits in with my idea of Weiss's rebellion. Because they weren't main episodes of the series, you may not have seen some of the World of Remnant series videos. They were quick asides on some of the world building of Remnant, and one was of the Schnee Dust Company. While he hasn't really been mentioned in the series proper, Nicholas Schnee, Santa Claus, Weiss's grandfather, was the one that originally created the SDC. He was a poor miner in his youth, but took his small inheritance, gathered a team of hardworking men, and began leading the charge to mine dust. He personally oversaw dangerous expeditions and built up the SDC as a reputable and honest business, built by those who worked their way up to the success. Eventually, Jacques Gillet, quite literally Jack Frost, married his daughter, taking up his last name and turning the SDC into the heartless, discriminatory megacorp it is now. One thing you might have noticed is that old Saint Nick doesn't have much of a design, part of the style of the World of Remnants. In fact, aside from kind of a larger size, the only element of design is that he has a red scarf. And that's why I think Weiss maintains a rebellion, even after being forced back to her father. After she escapes and starts on the path to becoming her own again, she takes up a red scarf, just like her grandfather's. Weiss wants to take back the Schnee name and make it mean something good again, like it once did when their grandfather ran the place. Though she's been ousted as an heiress, Weiss is no doubt on the path to making sure that she's remembered not for her name, but for her actions in this world. And all that from just a scarf. That's rather impressive as a detail. I suppose that might be a bit of a reach, but considering the fact that it's specifically a red scarf makes me think I'm kinda right on that. Considering Ruby's insistence on color choice, I feel that if it wasn't red, Weiss would be wearing a scarf that matches her dress a lot more, say blue or white. She doesn't wear a lot of red, only on her jacket in the original outfit. I'll choose to believe that the callback to Nicholas Schnee was intentional, which would bring us to the end of Weiss's outfits. I still feel like rebellion is a good choice of word for her and representing her designs, and even if it is a bit subdued. Like I said, soft rebellion is probably a bit more accurate, but I still think it fits. And it at least has the benefit of intentional design choices, unlike RWBY, but next season's look might give me a bit more to talk about. Considering where we left off and where we're going in Volume 7, I might just get my Rebel Weiss, though I also expected that for Volume 4. We'll just have to wait and see. See you next time for our Beauty and Beast, Blake Belladonna. Blackjack out.